What I want to explore in this video is the question of whether or not pressure groups are democratic. So in the last video we looked at whether or not pressure groups, why some pressure groups have more success than others, and in this video we're going to really examine pressure groups on par with an examination of UK democracy. So as an introduction, in earlier videos we explored the ideas behind theories of democracy. We examined the meanings of various types of democracy, including representative, liberal, and pluralist democracies. These issues were examined almost in a vacuum without looking at outside factors such as pressure groups. So the question we'll try to answer here is, are pressure groups a threat to the idea of democracy, or are they something that is good for democracy? One critique of representative democracy is that very little people is involved in following a general election. So as soon as a general election is called, people vote on their candidates, and then after that, political participation tends to die down. But apart from elections, people have very little input in the political process, and pressure groups are a good democratic way to allow people to become more involved. Pressure groups also allow for the protection of free speech and the critical discussion of government, something that would help in a pluralist democracy. So when applying the idea of pressure groups to the theories of democracy, is it clear that the definitions of different democracies do actually allow for the existence of pressure groups? And this would be a point in favour of the existence of pressure groups in a democracy. So technically, by definition, it would be said that pressure groups don't pose any threat to democracy, since democracy as an idea allows for the existence of pressure groups. But there are still issues with pressure groups that require a little bit more examination. And some even argue that pressure groups seek to undermine democracy rather than promote it. So what are the issues with pressure groups and democracy? It's commonly observed that most successful pressure groups tend to be those that benefit from both highly skilled and articulate members, as well as a strong financial base. However, there are cases where the cause with less financial backing is more important than the one with the more financial backing. A good example of this is the sort of debate between the climate crisis and oil companies. Oil companies are able to lobby the government, allowed to pressure the government, particularly the US government, with vast financial wealth, and therefore pushing the climate debate out of view. However, we have started to see sort of small changes in this political competition. Ultimately, though, the same problem still applies. The cause with the most financial backing tends to often be the cause that has the most success. And it really does beg the question as to whether or not this is democratic or even ethical, seeing as oil companies with the most money will be able to influence the government more than those people who are lobbying the government for climate change, for awareness on climate change. Does it really make sense that therefore, just because they have more money, they'll be more successful? There's also the argument that it makes government less efficient. The former Conservative Minister Douglas Hurd describes pressure groups as serpents that strangle efficient government. And we can interpret this kind of viewpoint in a couple of ways. The way in which insider groups have become more established in government has led to a more bureaucratic level of policy process. Pressure groups like the RSPB work very closely with the government, and thus this can lead to an inefficiency in the policy making process. However, some argue that whilst this might be a slow process for developing policy, it nevertheless makes the end result legislation better quality if you've got more people getting involved, more people with significant expertise looking at different policy objectives. The government is able to consult on matters of expertise with pressure groups to ensure that the right decisions are being made. And a second interpretation of Hurd's comments is really as follows. Pressure groups are generally concerned with only a specific area or a limited range of policies. And this could be a problem for a number of reasons, because it can conflict with the interests of government, who are more concerned with a vast range of political issues. So the government won't be able to focus on specific policies for too long, which goes against the aims of single issue pressure groups. And so, therefore, a conflict of interest starts to occur. So when it comes to insider pressure groups having more power, you can see that if they're also single issue pressure groups, that pushes the government towards trying to focus on a single issue rather than to focus on a vast range of policy. And that can be something that causes problems for democracy.